My name is Richard Furr, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
So I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired.
Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glow Cloud team.
Welcome everyone. Today we are here to help you build your technology career by answering any questions you may have about your technology career. My name is Mike Gibbs. I'm joined here by our Chief Technology Officer, Mark Milovanovic, and together we have been in this tech world a long time. Personally, I've been every kind of IT architect you can think of for the last 25 years, and I've loved every one of those roles. I've also spent 2 decades helping people get hired at companies including Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, Zscaler, Palo Alto Networks, and a whole host of other wonderful organizations. And I love getting people to their goals. So Mark and I come online once a week and answer any questions you may have. Mark, I'll introduce you to Mark. He's our Chief Technology Officer. He, like me, holds a Cisco Certified Internet Expert certification, and he also has been an engineer and an architect. Mark, why don't you introduce yourself for a few minutes, anything you want to say, and then we'll answer people's questions because we want them to build great careers.
Yeah, well, there's a few things I want to say. Number one, welcome to everybody. I know it's been one busy week already. We have a lot more exciting things to plan for you guys in store, not just this week, but the following weeks. I'll get into that a little bit. But number one, just like Mike, I want to let everybody know a big reason we do this is that early in our careers, we had to do a lot of trial and error. It's just the way it was. We didn't have the fortunate circumstances to always come across mentors and be able to ask them particular questions. You'll hear many times us bring out the ideas that we had to go out and find people, ask them questions, and then also learn how to ask these questions so that we can get the information that we needed, not the ones that we wanted. Because many times what happens, and you'll find this out in your own careers too, is we think we need something just to find out that's not really what we needed. That's just what we wanted, but it wasn't the best for us to be able to progress. So we're hoping as we're doing these weekly sessions with everybody that you come across with your questions in a way that helps us answer them so that you can build your career in an appropriate way so that any type of outside circumstances are not going to have this ridiculous influence on you where you cannot get that high-paying job that you really want to, irregardless of what your background is. If it's tech-related, no problem. We'll take tech people and we'll make them even better. And if you have no tech background, guess what? There is a place for you. And most of the times, the hurdles that you may have to overcome are completely different and a lot of times a lot easier than a lot of other people. But before we take a look at some of the questions you have all, there's a few things I want to mention. Number one, I'm going to start off with tomorrow. We got some great things planned for everybody. We'll have another YouTube live session, and this time it's going to be with Mike and with David Linthicum. And if you don't know who David Linthicum is, he's the author and the main instructor when it comes to the generative AI program that we also have available. If you want to take a look at the description in the video, there's a link to it. You can get some more information. We'll have the free ebook for it as well. You can get a little bit more studious up or educated on the process. But tomorrow, those two who have a, how would I put this? Let's just say with age comes a lot of wisdom. So they have a lot of experience that they're going to be able to share with you tomorrow. Some of them might be 20 years, 30 years, 40 years of different experiences, but they're going to be talking in specific when it comes to the AWS reInvent event that is currently going on. So there's going to be a lot of fantastic things that they're going to be able to discuss with you. And that's going to be tomorrow, if I'm correct, around 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then something else that we want to give to everybody, it's going to be our webinar. It's going to be tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I know that's a little bit of different time slot than what we usually have, but this is to give everybody a little bit of time to be there with the event with Mike and with David, and then join us for the 7 p.m. Webinar, where we are going to be answering your question in regards to how do you become a cloud architect? What is involved when it comes to a non-technical skill set as well as a technical skill set in furthering yourselves if you're aspiring to become that type of architect. And this, even though the predominant focus is going to be on cloud architecture, guess what? You can ask questions with regards to network architecture, security architecture, which is, by the way, one of the themes that was mentioned in the reInvent event that AWS had. So tune in for that tomorrow. You'll have some fun stories when it comes to that. But that's going to be our premier webinar for that day. If you have more questions, we can be with you on Zoom live. You come off mute, turn on your camera if you feel comfortable doing that, and we can have a one-on-one conversation, something that's a little bit more difficult to do on a live stream like this with YouTube. So that's one of the news. And then Friday, we're not done. We're going to have another live streaming session at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And I believe it's 2 p.m. Eastern Time, right, Mike? For Friday as well, if I'm correct. Friday, and this is going to be in regards to cloud architect interview process. Basically, how do you go about this interview process? What will be the impact of having training to train you specifically on how do you go through the process? How do you answer the questions? How do you understand the questions that are being asked from the hiring manager, as well as the stakeholders and anyone else that might be interviewed? So tune in for that as well. That's going to be also something fun. And again, these are live. You don't pay for this. You come YouTube, you enjoy, ask your questions, take advantage of the wealth of knowledge that Mike has. Mike has done, good gosh, what are we talking? 5,000 plus interviews across his lifetime or his career.
6,000.
So about 6,000. You see, I was even off.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for anyone to be able to join and ask questions specifically as regards to the interview process. Aside from that, there's a lot of goodies. If you look in the description box, everything from how to win the interview guide. If you want to take a look at that, subscribe, take that out, get a little studied up for Friday session. If you want to learn a little bit more in regards to how to land your first architect job, that's a really good ebook so that you can get up to date in regards to the webinar tomorrow as well. And you can kind of formulate your questions a little bit. But that's enough of me right now. I hope everybody that you're going to join us, enjoy the content. And aside from that, I am really excited to find out now what everybody has kind of questions related to the career, the process of the career. It could be in regards to also if you're maybe on a help desk career, maybe you're just in some kind of hospitality career, whatever it may want, we're here to serve you and answer your questions to help you move forward in a productive and an efficient manner so that you can actually acquire the role that you really want to. So with that, Mike, if we have no further statements, I say let's get the questions rolling.
Let's get to the questions, and I think we should tell everybody that it is Cyber Week for Cyber Monday, and everything this week is 50% off. So let's start answering questions. Whether you want to become a cloud architect, ask us. You want to become an enterprise, ask us. Architect, ask us. An AI architect, ask us. Want to become a cloud engineer? You want to think or ask if you think we think it's a good career and or why? Ask us. You're stuck in your current job and you're not getting promoted, and you want to know what to do? Ask us. So bring us your questions. Mark, let's start answering questions.
All right, Tarun, let's bring in the first question that we have. And this is from drifting_tangerine. Hi, Mike. Please, what do I do when the interview becomes technical if I'm applying for a cloud architecture role?
Drifting Tangerine, let's answer this correctly. I would expect your interview to get technical. Now, the question becomes, are they getting technical as an engineer, or are they getting technical as an architect? And I would give you the exact difference because they could be two there. So if I was going to ask Mark an architecture-related question, I might say to Mark, we have two direct connections to the AWS cloud. They're both 10 gig connections. How could I load share on both of them without getting out-of-order packets? Mark would give me an architectural level answer. Mark, why don't you do it? In 90 seconds or less.
Okay. That's a fantastic opportunity architecture that you have in regards to having two private lines there. My question for you, though, would be first, before I can give you a succinct answer to this, is one of these connections more expensive than the other connection, or are they equally when it comes to the cost that you pay monthly for them?
They're equal in their cost.
Okay. Well, considering that we'll have to use a routing protocol such as BGP because we really don't have another choice, I would suggest what we do here is we go with the local preference or the weight attribute first when it comes to BGP. That just allows us a simple way of moving traffic from one link to the other link. Alternatively, and again, and I don't know what the specifics are when it comes to the actual addressing space that you have set up in your architecture currently, there is this nuance that we can go ahead and actually leak more specific prefixes. But again, I would have to take a look a little bit more in regards to what currently you have implemented in your environment so that I can give you a more succinct answer to that.
Right. Okay. So Drifting Tangerine, I asked him a very technical question, and he gave me a perfect technical answer. Now, what was good about it was as follows. First, he asked, then he clarified, and he wanted to make sure that it even financially made sense to load share on the connection. So that was what I would get as an architect. Now, Mark's going to ask me a deep technical engineering question, which I would not have as part of my architecture world, and I'll show you how I would answer it. Mark, ask me what kind of a Python script I would need to write in order to go to a router and set up BGP and configure 100 BGP peering sessions to a route reflector.
Hi, Mike. Thank you for joining us today. I see on your resume that you mentioned that you're quite affluent when it comes to the BGP protocol, which we use very much. One of the limitations and restrictions that we have here, and it's been quite a pain in our backside, is that we have quite a few devices that we want to have the ability to automate the actual implementation and the coming up of the peering sessions when it comes to BGP. Could you let me know roughly what type of Python script would kind of look like, something that we can deploy through our software-defined networking solution so that we can have some automation in place?
You know, Mark, my expertise is architecture, in that I have consulted to, say, 6 of the 10 world's largest internet service providers on the design of their edge routing. Additionally, I've designed BGP peering sessions, internet point of presence locations for them, and helped traffic engineer their paths. But I've not done engineering. Engineering meaning the hands-on, how do you build, how do you code. That's not my area of expertise. If you look at my area of expertise, it's either helping internet service providers increase their availability, increase their performance, and hence increase their revenue by offering new services like video, or my expertise is working with enterprises and helping them make meaningful transitions to their business, organizing their people, their processes, and their technology to get them to their goal. And if you really want to check my expertise, it's there. It's on digital transformation. Engineering is not my world. If you're looking for engineering, I can recommend some good engineers for you. But if you're looking at an architect that can really change your business, improve your feasibility, I'm the person that can help you. And Drifting Tangerine, what did I do? I pointed him to what I knew. I pointed him to my expertise, the things he could talk to me about, and I also made it clear, I'm not here to be an engineer. Mark, you were going to say something after that. I didn't want to cut you off.
It was so funny, a natural reaction that everyone should be aware of. If you answer a question like Mike just did, even though I try to draw him in when it comes to the automation, my next question would be, because he's so savvy, so knowledgeable when it comes to the actual design, the architecture, and the planning of these things, my next question would be, well, could he tell me if I really truly need automation? Because that's really his strength. So just a natural kind of consequence of how Mike answered the question there. But aside from that, Drifting Tangerine, you should expect a level of technical questions coming your way. And one of the reasons I mentioned that as well is always remember, architecture is a planning and a strategic role. And with that kind of role, you are bridging what in a sense is a business need or business requirement with a technology that you understand. So understanding from the perspective of how does the interaction work between the entire system of things? How does this particular technology can be applied when it comes to a particular problem that you have? And sometimes we could also be just bridging on how can we make a business process more efficient by applying a particular technology. So I don't want anyone to have this misunderstanding just because we say you're not going to be touching the technology, that you should not expect questions that are going to probe you a little bit in regards to, are you technically savvy enough to actually do the job? Because you're not selling automobiles here, right? Because you're on the end, really what you're doing, you're selling a holistic solution that potentially could be made up of multiple parts or some type of modular building blocks that are going to do something in regards to making the business more efficient. This could also come down to security. You could make the business more secure, but the point is expect something from it. But if you go down the deep end, people start asking you about what does a protocol look at the packet level, for example, or if you ever looked at logs or some other type of monitoring, you might want to already kind of raise that red flag a little bit and think like, you know what, either the person that I'm talking to has no idea what the position is like, or perhaps they're trying to weed me out. See if, can I answer that type of question? And if I can, perhaps I'm not that type of architect that they're truly looking for.
Yeah.
Okay. Let us take a look at our next question, Tyrone, please. From, I'm going to pronounce this Shiite or Sheed. He's asking, what is a specific cloud engineer project I can do that would assist me in standing out in an interview? One that would set me apart.
Okay, so, and I've interviewed a lot of engineers, so there's two sides of this. Now, Sid, I want to make it clear. I don't care any about the projects that you've ever done in your life when I hire a cloud engineer. They are meaningless to me. Here's what matters to me, and then I'll talk about cloud projects too. What matters to me is that you understand the technology that you're dealing with. Not, can you go in there and just click a bunch of buttons on a CLI or a management console and set up a WordPress. I don't care about that because honestly, I could teach anyone to do it in less than a day. That is not a concern. And most of the projects that people do show me they know how to do what a junior technician does. And that doesn't set anyone apart. Now, if I interview you and you want to be a cloud engineer and I can say, talk to me the differences between block storage, object storage, and file storage. How do they work? Where are they used? How do you performance tune them? And you can answer that as a cloud engineer. Now I'm starting to get very excited. Now, if I can talk to you about, okay, what's going to happen related to CPU performance and DRAM performance of our virtual machines? How would you capacity plan the virtual machines that you have in 2-3 different clouds? When do you know when to upgrade them and or add capacity? If you could answer that, I'd be pretty impressed. If I asked you, how would you install with a script 3,000 virtual machines in less than 5 minutes by setting it up with all the storage environment they need and the networking they need? Wow, you have the skills to do the job, and I'm getting impressed. If I asked you, how would you lock down a web server? And you were able to talk about disabling the unnecessary packages on that operating system. I'm just talking about the server itself. And installing endpoint protection like a host-based firewall, anti-malware, those kind of things. Again, I'm going to say, wow, Sid can do the job. Because here's the thing. In engineering, it's not about you doing anything like in a certification where you click, click, click here and it's done and you set up a WordPress website. It's about a lot of thinking and a lot of planning and tuning and optimizing. So I care what you know. Now, if I talk to you, for example, and asked you as a cloud engineer, you have to deal with a high security environment. You're being asked to look into different firewalls. Could you go out there and explore the Palo Alto firewall, the Checkpoint firewall, the Cisco firewall? Could you compare that with AWS WAF and determine what might be good for our business? Then can you get in the lab and then can you try to break into these things and try to damage them? That would be good for engineering. So I'm more concerned about your ability to know the tech and be able to understand it and then be able to work with it. And I'll give you an example. So I've never done it. Before I got hired, I did play with stuff. I didn't put a project down on my resume. I knew not to. Now, I'll show you an engineering competent answer. And the reason I'm going to show you an engineering competent answer is I want you to see what an engineering competent answer is on an interview. I'm going to make it based on something out of networking because I know Mark and I speak a common networking language, but I want to show you what I would get. Now, Shid, if you showed up on an interview and you never had a job, never did a single cloud project in your entire life, and I asked you a question and you answered it like this, I would hire you on the spot. And quite frankly, that's what happened to me. My first job was a senior engineer. Mark, ask me something about LSAs and OSPF, or the difference between the different kinds of areas, stub, not so stub, or some kind, so I can give you an engineering answer.
Okay. Mike, thank you for being here. I have a question for you in regard. You mentioned that you were quite proficient in the OSPF routing protocol. We happen to have a area where we're actually redistributing outside routes from our BGP peering with our ISP. But we don't necessarily want to inject these routes into our core of our network. Could you let me know, based on that, perhaps what type of area we do need to implement here, and perhaps what LSAs come up with that?
So I want to make sure I completely get this. So in the OSPF area, you're going to have an area where you're going to have to redistribute an external route of some kind. Now, that area where you're redistributing those external routes, what do you call it? Do you want them to actually propagate through the rest of the network, or do you not want other routes to propagate in this area?
We actually do want them to propagate into the other areas, but we want to make sure that these are propagated as external routes. We don't want them to be propagated as inter-area type of routes.
Oh, okay. And in that area, do you want all the other routes coming into it, or do you want a full spectrum, the entire routing table coming into this area, or do you just want a subset, like a default route?
Just a subset. That would be best, because again, we don't want to inject too much into our core. We want to keep our core lean and mean, basically our backbone of our OSPF areas, so that we can make sure that we don't have to now spend extra money on beefing up the routers and so forth.
Yeah. So it puts us in this environment where we've got a lot of different kinds of areas we could use. I'm going to walk through each of them and I'll explain which would be appropriate for you. We typically have a normal area. And in a normal area, we get the LSAs that are originated by the routers, and they're typically type 1 and type 2 if they're on a broadcast multi-access segment. So the type 1s are by the routers and the status of its links, and the type 2 LSAs are generated from the designated routers and the backup designated routers. Now, if we've got routes coming from other areas like you really want, if we have routes coming from other areas, they're typically a type 3 or a summary LSA. And if we go to the type 4 and the type 5 LSAs, the type 4 LSA describes how do we reach that type 5 external area, and the type 5 is the external route itself. Now, we also have the opportunity to use different kinds of areas, such as stub, totally stubby, and not so stubby, which is, as we're talking about things, we're probably going to be more appropriate for you. In a stub area, you basically only have one way to actually egress into the rest of the network. So realistically speaking, what you do is you actually send a default route into that area, and you don't send the type 3 or the type 4 or type 5 LSAs in. And that way you have your internal routes, best routing for internally, and you know how to egress quite simply. Now, that works great, but in this environment, you've only got those type 1s, those type 2s, type 3s. Now, we can set it up where we've got a totally stubby area where all you get is a default route, whereas before you can get a default route in some other routes, and you only have one egress. But now at this point, if I want to take an external route and redistribute it in, like you're describing, I cannot. Because in a totally stubby area, I can't allow for external routes. Now, we could come up with this concept of a not so stubby area. And if we redistribute routes into the not so stubby area, which is what you're talking about, we get some interesting things. We can basically have a limited set of routes on the way coming in from OSPF, which is what we're looking for. But we can take those external routes, which you would normally have as a type 5 LSA, but we can't send type 5 LSAs out of a stub area into the core. But by putting it in a not so stubby area, we will send them in as a type 7 LSA, which is kind of a type 5 LSA masquerading in disguise. And that way it'll cross the external networks. In your environment, you need something like a not so stubby area.
And just so everybody understands, the question that I gave to Mike is a very, very difficult one normally to answer. And that is because I gave him he had to understand that we're talking about an edge area, basically connecting up to the internet. and that we do not want to flood unnecessarily all the routes that are going to ingesting into the other area. And we also wanted to avoid other area routes to also inject into that particular area, just because it wouldn't serve any purpose, right? Because it's an exiting type of area. So as you all can see, there's levels to when it comes to this engineering and how you ask the questions. And these type of questions, just so you know, is stuff you'll face on the CCIE. I'm not exaggerating. It's these kind of convoluted questions that make you start to think about, okay, what am I working on here? Why would this? What are the repercussions of that? So it's a very specific question that you might get. I did want to add something, if you don't mind, to the question that Shid had here, Mike. When it comes to projects or labs or anything of such matter, it is really just for your benefit. Yeah. And it's the journey that you take with it. Because this is what's going to happen is you can give me your resume and it can have 50 projects on it. How do you know if any of these projects ever would apply to my organization?
Yes.
You know, you hear these things that people say that organizations are like snowflakes. None of them are the same. That to a certain extent is true. And that's why projects like that, they have no inherent value outside of what you learn from it and how you can communicate what you learn from it. That's the unfortunate truth. Now, what you could do, though, is, let's say you've undergone certain projects and you wanted to use your knowledge of them to set you apart. You would have to add something to it like Mike did. Not only do you understand the technology and how you used it during that project, but more importantly, and this is what most engineers have somewhat of a trouble with, because we're looking at more like a focus type of picture instead of the bigger picture, right? But if you want to set yourself apart, what you can actually mention is the interactions of these systems that you have kind of chained together with other systems and how that impacted the business overall. So from an engineering standpoint, if you can explain something like that to me, then pieces of that project could have merits when it comes to the interview. But outside of that, it really doesn't matter to the hiring manager if you've done 50 labs or 50 projects. It's irrelevant. It's how you can apply what you learned and can communicate it during the process itself.
Right. And I want to go back to Shid to explain why. So one, the response that I gave to Mark was way above and beyond. But the reason I showed it is it didn't matter if you've ever worked in networking or not. If you would have given Mark a response like that, he would have said, whoa, this guy knows networking. We need him on our team. And that was what I was first doing. So this next thing is, if you understand all of this tech, it becomes very easy. Now, if I know OSPF like that, and then I'm going to bring it back to you, it doesn't matter if I'm working on an Arista switch, a Cisco switch, an Extreme network switch, a Juniper network switch, because in the end, everything else is easy if you know what you need to do and why. So now, what does a real world environment look like, Shid? And if we know what the real world environment looks like, and you want to build a project that looks like a real world environment, then you'll be able to learn certain things. So let me give you a real world project that would help build your skills. I would like you to think about doing the following. Getting a single server, and on this server, building yourself an OpenStack cloud, which is a cloud like anybody else's cloud, and it's used. I would like you to then create a VPN from that cloud to both AWS and Azure, because 98% of organizations are hybrid multi-cloud at this point, meaning multiple clouds. So now at least you've set up the infrastructure for your environments. Then I'd like you to learn how to lock these VPCs and VNets down, because that's going to be fundamental things that you need to do. And that will be things like your packet filters, getting rid of certain things that are naturally open. And that'll teach you a little bit about security. So first learn the security principle and then set up 2 VPCs and then lock them down. Now, then maybe after you do that, the next thing that I would say that you could do is, let's make sure we get the network down. So good. Now connect these things to the internet on both sides with some form of an internet gateway, and then lock that down. If you're going to need a connection to the internet, now you're going to need to set up firewalls at least by the minimum thing, and learn how to set up firewall policies. Now you're getting some packet filters. And then behind the firewalls, place some load balancers, and place a load balancer on the AWS cloud and the Azure cloud. and put some web servers directly behind those load balancers on both clouds, because this is real world. Then set up a DNS policy that'll load share across those two clouds for those two web servers. But these web servers need to be in a proper demilitarized zone where you're going to have security. Then create a Terraform script and launch a bunch of virtual machines in various subnets and various clouds, and set up the routing in between them, as well as the packet filtering ACL kind of things between them. Set up a database that you can put in both AWS, Azure, and your Nutanix, or I'm sorry, your OpenStack cluster that you built, and exchange information between these databases and keep them synchronized. And you'll learn real quickly why you can't use things like DynamoDB or Google Cloud Bigtable, and you'll learn all these things that you can't do, because this is the real world. So maybe you'll have to find something like an Apache Cassandra that can write on all nodes and all three clouds. Keep those things kind of synchronized. And then create some fake data in each cloud and get them to synchronize. And if you do this, and also, I want you to set up an Active Directory server somewhere and federate those Active Directory servers with your clouds for identity and access management. And why are you doing this? And set up some, because you're now going to have to work with Linux for some of your web servers. And now you're going to have to work with networking. Now you're going to have to work with security. Now you're going to have to do some kind of data stuff along the way. And in the end, you're learning the cloud. And now if I ask you questions on these things, you're going to be able to answer them. So that's the kind of a real world cloud project. And in the end, I really don't care if you've done that or not. I care if when I ask you, how would you do this? What do you need to do that you know? But if you learn the tech first, and then you build out something real world, and when things don't work, use debugging commands, and the debugging commands can help you. And here's what I mean. If you've got two things trying to come up in peer review BGP, and it's not coming up, but you can look at what state they're in, idle versus active versus open, connect, open sent, what have you established. You'll have to when the messages come across, you'll be able to say, oh, connection was withdrawn, connection was reset, and why. And that'll teach you, but you need to know how this stuff works in order to do that. I hope that helps. By means, come and free, ask any questions. But this is what I look for as a hiring manager. I look for the fact the person comes in, hey, everybody else did this. Yeah, I don't care about that. Whoa, they did something big. Wow. This is the one person that came to me that said, I want to be better, and I'm going to do the stuff that nobody does, and this is how I stand out. And since you asked me that question, that's the answer, and that's what I would do.
Yeah. And
if anybody has some questions, ask them, please.
I was going to say, this is a very wonderful example of when you all ask us questions on what you can potentially expect us to say. So keep up the great questions. We'll look forward to more. Something that you need to understand from this is what Mike just explained to you is how to build your own cloud environment, basically, with open source tools and parts. What is great about this approach, again, is you're weaving together a story, really, of how you're putting these things together, understanding how the underlying technology actually fits together and works. And I don't want to say not every engineer does this, but a large swathe don't do that. They focus in silos on something very specific instead of how do I build out an entire solution and then get it to work. And you can pick your strength and your weaknesses, right? If you're a little weak, let's say with databases, at least you learn as to why would you want to have a database in this location? Yeah. And what are some of the simple things or the fundamental aspects of just doing the basic implementation? You don't have to go down the route of doing all the specifics that come with securing the database or these type of things. But you may be more adept when it comes to compute, because that's where you study more your engineering. Perhaps you can build out some scenarios, like Mike mentioned, with Active Directory tied into some type of federated IAM system, and then tie them back to the virtual machines. And that's then where you display this. Oh, okay, so he's pretty good. You're like a T-shaped kind of engineer, right? Where you get a little broad, and then all of a sudden, boom, you have your specialty. That's how you can present it as well. So give that a shot, let us know how it works out. And for everybody else, keep up the great questions. We look forward to seeing what else everybody has in store for us. This is why we're here for you. Don't let's take a look at our next question here, please. All right, from Cloud Doctor, it says, what tools and platforms should a cloud architect master?
Okay, so when I think tools, I think of a tool belt of a construction worker with hammers and nails and things. And I'm going to bring it that way first. When you see a construction worker show up at a site, they have a tool belt, right? They have a hard hat and they're ready to go when they're ready to work. They've got hammers, they've got screwdrivers, they've got whatever the tools are, other trades, drills, those kind of things. And then you see an architect show up. And the architect's wearing a suit, and they have a hard hat, and they've got a computer, and maybe they've got a ruler and a calculator, and they show up and they talk, and they have PowerPoint. They give a presentation of what the building's going to look like, or a mock-up of the building. Same thing with architects. The tools that you need to master are Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Excel, and a graphics program like Microsoft Visio, or, for example, Draw.io or Lucidchart. Because we cloud architects don't touch the technology. Now, what platforms do we need to understand? We need to understand the technology that we're going to be dealing with. So what does that mean? If you really know what a cloud is, if you've ever designed a cloud, if you've ever built a cloud, and you've ever seen the clouds, all it really is, and I've helped design many of these clouds for the last 20-some years, I've been designing clouds. You're just designing a data center. And inside of the data center, you've got your routers, you've got your switches, you got your cables, you got your servers, you got your storage boxes that used to run their own network like Fiber Channel, but now they push it over the IP network, the Ethernet network. And you've got your physical load balancers, you got your physical firewalls. That's a data center. Now you take that data center, you slap on a control plane to these things, and the control plane basically says, okay, I now manage all these 18 million servers that are sitting on my data center and the storage. And then it gives you a front end to it where all you have to do is click on the management console, write a script, enter some CLI, and that will carve a virtual data center out of you. Your virtual data center is called your VPC or your DNet. That's your virtual network function virtualization that you put your servers and your stuff in. So if you're going to be an architect, you need to understand everything from that data center. And where people go wrong is they try to learn AWS, but they don't learn the underlying technology. And if you don't know the underlying technology, the names of something and how to configure it, you can't design with that. It's not anywhere close to what you need. So you need to understand networking. Routers, switches, routing protocols, IP addressing, that kind of thing. You need to understand security. How to secure systems, firewalls, IDS, IPS systems, where are you using VPN concentrators, where are you using IAM systems, what are the type of IAM that you could use, what type of network security could you do, what kind of rate limiting could you do, what kind of QoS policies could you use for security, what kind of network admission control could you be using, what kind of end-to-end encryption protocols could you be using, and whether it be storage, whether it be data that's in flight, any kind of environments, what kind of secure application things do our developers need to be doing that I need to be thinking about that's part of the architecture. What does a disaster recovery plan look like? What kind of quantifiable security concerns does a business have? Okay, what kind of compute capacity do we need? How many virtual machines do we need? What kind of processors do we need on these systems? Is it going to be a GPU intensive task or a CPU intensive task? If so, what kind of way are the applications written? Are they written multi-threaded where we need more cores, or are they single-threaded where they need higher clock speeds? Those kind of server-based things, because that's compute. And whether compute's a virtual machine, whether compute's a container, you still need to understand compute. And if you know that, you understand everything. And it doesn't matter whether it's a Kubernetes environment in your data center, OpenShift Kubernetes from IBM, or AWS's Kubernetes, or Azure's Kubernetes, or Google Kubernetes, because it's all the same stuff. AI and big data, you definitely need to know. What makes AI possible? What can you do with big data? What kind of databases do you need? When do you use a relational database versus a NoSQL database versus a data warehouse? What goes into mapping and reduction data? Not how to do it in order to create data lakes, and what kind of data hygiene practices are. And of course, we teach all this stuff in our architect program, but this is architecture kind of stuff. And that's a kind of an example of most of what we need. What kind of patterns could be there for our applications? Which kind of application architecture patterns are better for us, specific use cases? And then the rest of what we need to do, platforms, is we need to bring it back to the business. Remember, we're cloud architects, we're not engineers. I love engineers. They are awesome. Engineers are about building and making sure everything works. We're about making sure the systems optimize the business performance. So we need to have good knowledge and business acumen. We need to lead large teams. We need to be able to present at conferences, executive briefing settles to the board, for example. So it's more about mastering presentations. It's selling architectures, and in many cases, we end up working as solutions architects, which are usually related to sales. So it's sales skills, it's executive presence, it's emotional intelligence. So that's all that cloud architect stuff to master. And I encourage you to join us on the How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar on Thursday, because it'll be on Zoom and we can talk and I can ask you questions. I can interview you if you want. I mean, we can have all kinds of fun and we'll do anything we can to help you. But those are really your tools, your platforms. Now, you may also have to master a framework of some kind, like an architecture. TOGAF is a widely used framework. I know we teach students TOGAF and get them certified in TOGAF 10. I recommend that because it helps them stand out. But typically, there's TOGAF frameworks. There's Zachman type frameworks that we might be using as enterprise architecture frameworks that are good for our clients. So kind of hope that helps.
It's quite funny, Mike. When I read this question, first thought to my mind came was PowerPoint or Google Slides.
Yeah.
To learn how to actually use this platform. But to kind of give you a little bit additional information there, Cloud Doctor, you want to have a surface level understanding when it comes to the cloud services that a provider is going to be renting to you or leasing to you. I'm not a big proponent, and I've said this multiple times, of learning the 200 services that they have. I think that's pretty ridiculous unless you are part of a solutions architect team at one of these vendors selling the particular services.
Yes.
If you're actually more, I guess we'll have to separate it, like what we would call more of a generic cloud architect, meaning that you don't specialize, let's say, on one cloud provider, but your view is towards a multi-cloud type of design. It is more important to understand maybe what are these similar services that are across the different cloud providers, and then becoming familiar with them in regards to, number one, why do they even exist? And the reason I say why do they even exist is a lot of the customers that you're going to be working with, and this is also holds true for engineers, they want to know, why should they bother with it? Why should they invest money into it? Now, even though you may not necessarily be sitting in, let's say, on the stakeholder meetings, and then to be able to figure out what their overall plan is until you have built some rapport with them, you still want to have that type of mindset. So in the end, really for me, it truly comes down to all the stuff that Mike mentioned, and there's a lot of stuff there, but for me, it's always critical thinking. Have critical thinking as part of your tool belt. That should be an automatic default to kind of mindset to be able to think through these things as they're being presented to you, because it's going to serve you across a wide swath of the technical things that you'll have to learn about across all different providers. And also when it comes to these type of business acumen type of skills that we're discussing, that's really where the focus should be on. And if you can master these non-technical aspects, a lot of the other things that you're going to come across are going to be so much more easier. We'll get to what Shit said there too, but Shit kind of touched on it as well. He mentioned being able to communicate these things. So as you can see, technology is there, but it's these non-technical skills, the communication skills, the critical thinking skills that you should really master. Now, if you want to call them tools or skills or platform, I leave that up to you. But those are some things that I would definitely mention that you should master if you want to become somebody that is known as a trusted advisor to the customers that you're going to be advising. Or perhaps, let's say you do work for a vendor. Same thing. You will want to master those type of skill sets.
Yeah, and I want to add to two things Mark said. One is if you actually work for a vendor like AWS or Microsoft or Google or IBM or Cisco, none of their people know 100% of their services that they offer either. And they actually have solutions architects in different things. They'll have solutions architects that focus on every one of these specialties and their areas, and that's their whole job. So they have generic people that do the best they can, and then they bring in these other experts when it comes down to it. And in all my solution architect roles, I was either there as a principal solutions architect, where I was an expert on something that people brought me in for, or if I was more on that generic-y side, I would bring other people to me, and that way I was a coordinator of people, because it's better to show Mark, if I have an architecture team, it's better for me to show Mark as the networking person behind the networking than someone that doesn't know networking. And that's why I typically go in and I always bring people with me. Now we're talking about applications. I bring an application architect with me, and that way I show the client, not only do I care, but we can actually help them.
Yep, 100% agree. All right, let's take a look at our next few questions. And everybody, keep it up. Wonderful questions so far. Really look forward to it. Go ahead, Tyrone. Please put the next question. From Ahmed. They're asking, how many hours are needed to prepare for the AWS Solution Architect certification for those who have a good foundation in cloud services and are an expert in networking, basically?
Well, it all depends on what your expertise level is that you're calling expert. So, for example, would you, in your mind, know how to design a cloud provider? Meaning, could you go think about it? Could you think about the network that needs to be designed? Could you think about ways that you could potentially guarantee performance on that network? Could you think about how you could cut failure rates in a large-scale network down to, say, 40 milliseconds and allow things to be rerouted without actually thinking about it? Would you know how to design that actual network? Now, would you know how to design that data center with a high level of redundancy and a good level of compute and a good level of storage? Would you understand where those demilitarized zones would go, how they would connect to the internet, and all their BGP pairing sessions? There's a reason I'm saying that. That's where I started. I will tell you, I spent 2 days to prepare for the Google Professional Cloud Architect exam and passed that first time with like a 90-something% score. It was nothing. So if you have real expert knowledge of that, and when I mean networking, that's what I'm actually talking about. 2 days. And because these exams are really easy if you know the technology. Here's all the exam is. The name of something and how to configure it. So the exam is an internet gateway. If you know that an internet gateway is a router that connects to the internet, then poof, that's the whole thing that could have been, hours, half an hour worth of learning in an AWS Solution Architect certification. If you understand that a NAT gateway in AWS is nothing more than a firewall that does NAT and allows your outbound traffic to be sent out with port address translation and it's traffic back but didn't allow internal things, then poof, you don't need to learn what a NAT gateway is. If you know what a virtual machine is, then you know what an EC2 instance is. If you know block storage, object storage, and file storage, then all you got to do is spend 30 minutes learning the AWS names that they made for it, because you already know what they are. So all this is a vocabulary test of a bunch of names and then trying to figure out how to configure it. So, but there's almost no configuration on the actual exam. So it's a pretty easy exam if you know networking a data center. Now, here's the opposite side of it, Ahmed. So Ahmed, we've got now a person that's brand new and they go and read an AWS Solutions Architect Associate certification. Now they've got the concept of two things. What the heck is this EC2 instance? And it's not even covered in the curriculum. Trying to imaginary think about what an EC2 instance is, trying to conceptualize something which they actually hid from you what the technology is, and then learn how to configure it. That is like running a marathon. And I will tell you, doing that legitimately, going through actual training, reading the actual content, would be very challenging, and it could literally take 3 to 6 months for someone that's not cheating by going to one of the online test sites and getting a copy of the exam. So it all depends what your level of expert knowledge is. My level of expert knowledge in a data center is knowing how to set up and design an internet service provider from scratch, knowing how to set up the routing, knowing how to underline their infrastructure, knowing how to engineer that traffic, knowing how you would think how to connect that to, say, 10,000 remote locations and manage that level of networking. And if you know all those things that are necessary and that needs to be done, that to me is an expert. And if you've got that, I would tell you about 2 days. Kind of hope that helps.
Yeah, and Ahmed, everybody is a little bit different here too. Even if we take out the idea of how you learn, how fast you learn, I keep thinking back to also, and by the way, I've taken multiple certifications, so it wouldn't be my first go around, but I always had to consider my circumstances. Do you have a full-time job? Do you have other responsibilities? How many hours would you be actually able to study on a daily basis? And when I mean actually study is being present during that study, be able to actively recall also what you're doing. So not just skimming or reading or the act of studying, but actual studying.
Yeah.
And depending on what that is, you could potentially, like Mike said, if you're spending, let's say, an hour a day, Monday through Friday, so that gives you 5 hours. And let's say you spend anywhere from 2 to 4 hours every, Saturday and Sunday, you might be able to creep up to closely between 15 to 20 hours a week. And then potentially, maybe within, let's say, 2 months, you may be able to tackle it based on your experience. But that all depends on, if you can really realistically do that. Aside from that, the best that I would recommend to you is at least inflate a little bit the numbers you're going to have. So let's say the average is 80 hours.
Yeah.
Let's say that's going to take, let's say, average 80 hours for your experience. If not, you double it, let's say 160 hours. And then you start planning out how you're going to study. And then take a look at the curriculum itself and be honest with you as you go through the curriculum. What is it that you know and don't know? And the things that you do know something about, at what depth does it suffice? Do you even recall what you've studied before? There's a lot of factors that come in. But be kind to yourself. When you start off, whatever number you give yourself that you might need, if it's 80 hours, double it, and then go from there. The important part about all of this is, and that's why I hate is using a strong word, but I generally dislike the certification community in that sense, because it always feels like they're rushing you. Who can do something quicker than the other one? And I think that would be the wrong approach when it comes to that. So inflate the numbers that you think you might need, and then focus on ingesting and digesting the information. Because here's the important part, and I want you to know, Ahmed, and everybody else, it really doesn't matter how long it takes you to study. What is important for you is to have the knowledge and the ability to communicate that knowledge. Because in the end, you have to answer the question, why are you even studying for that particular certification? What is your purpose? Is the purpose to impress somebody that you passed it on the first time? Is it to impress somebody that you did it in half the time they did? Or is the purpose of you using it as a marketing tool so that you can land that job interview and knock that job interview out of the park? Whatever the answer to any of these questions is, I think should dictate how much time you are willing and ready to buy out and assign to your studies. So just wanted to put that in there for you. Go ahead, Mike.
Mark, I think that's a really great perspective. What are you trying to look to get out of it? So that there's a lot to be said that. Now, I know this is off topic. I have been a Mac user for the last 20 years. Unfortunately, my $8,000 M2 Mac Ultra couldn't handle GPU encoding for things, so I'm now using a Windows machine. So I don't know a lot about Windows and haven't used it for years, but I have to show this. For some reason, Windows keeps changing my background screen. And look at this cool, Tyrone, share this. This is like the coolest thing ever. Doesn't everybody like cats? Or is it just me that is absolutely cat obsessed? But I have always loved lions. Anyway, Tyrone, you could put that down. It was just, I thought it was kind of cool to actually see a cat like that just pop up on my screen. Ahmed, I appreciate the question. Shukran. And the key is, it all depends on the goal. I think Mark answered it fairly quickly and very succinctly there.
Yeah, and the reason I tell you that, Ahmed, is I'm not trying to be vague on purpose, but I'm telling you from somebody who has invested a lot of time in achieving a CCIE. It's not something you do in 2 weeks. Let's just be fair. And when I set my goal of wanting to achieve it, I roughly had a time frame in mind what it could potentially take me to accomplish it. But it was really based on what can I churn out weekly and monthly. And then I added a little bit of these things that we call life into it, because life happens. You can't isolate yourself completely. And that's why I wanted to give you a little bit of a different perspective in regards to what really your mindset should be towards a certification or even attempting one. It shouldn't be necessarily that I set the expectation that it takes you X amount of hours to do it. Because what if you don't reach it in those hours? Does it make you stupid? Less intelligent than anyone else? No. And you never want to set yourself up for failure, but rather you want to set yourself up for success. So I hope that gives you a little bit of different perspective, hopefully a more realistic one as well when it comes to how much time you should potentially spend on a certification. So, but if you do have any more questions, Ahmed, you're welcome to put them into the chat. If not, I do invite you for tomorrow's webinar. I think you'll very much enjoy how to get your first cloud architect, because we go into a couple more details there in regards to what we call cost of opportunity, what you want to really invest your time and money into when you're trying to achieve a development or progress in your career. So let's take a look at the next question.
And Ahmed, the second half of your question, I don't know what your background is, but generally speaking, an AWS certification will not take you into the cloud market. So you will need much more than that. So Ahmed, I would like to know whether you'd like to be a cloud architect or a cloud engineer. You didn't ask that, but in either case, I'll let you know what you would need to know. But the AWS Solutions Architect Professional itself is not enough for anyone to get a job or be in the cloud market by itself. Now, it sounds like you know networking, so maybe that's enough, but I'd love to know what you want to do, just because I want to make sure that we can get you to your goals.
And Tyrone, can you pull up the statement from Shid? And my end, it came in at 239. I just want to pull that up for everybody so that they can see it as well. So Shid said, thank you, I'm still in college and have been stuck on that for a while. So meaning his decision on how he would progress, especially in his predicament. And he says, what matters most is being able to apply the skill, communicate how, and understand the technologies. This is 1000% correct. If you can take the things that you've learned, and by the way, just so everybody understands, when you actually learn something, with learning comes change, right? The application of a skill that has changed, so it means you actually learn something. Then, once you've learned it and you've understood it, and now you can communicate that. And that's really where the goal comes in, being able to talk about these things, not within a little silo, but in a generalist kind of way, so that people can come with you on that journey of following the stories as you tell them. And then understanding the technologies, well, you're in the technology field. Nobody is going to want to talk to you if you're trying to sell them cars or you want to discuss automobiles, right? If you're talking to a recruiter or a hiring manager that is trying to hire you as a cloud engineer or an architect. So it makes very sense. So keep these things in mind, everybody, that it's the application of the skill, how you talk about it, how you communicate them. That's where competency comes also in. And then also understanding the surrounding technologies of it, because that's really what you're in there for.
Mm-hmm. And the communication piece is critical for a few things. How do I know what you know as a hiring manager? I'm not going to ask you to touch the technology on an interview. And in many cases, the managers wouldn't know how to touch the technology in the first place. They have to determine if they like you, if they feel that you're competent. And that's why they're going to ask competency questions for the majority of it. Now, maybe it's different for software engineers, but for network engineers or cloud engineers or architects or a lot of roles, or security engineers and security architects, it's a verbal asking them a question. So it's all how they answer it. And let's get to Kay, but let's get to, well, go ahead, Mark.
No, go ahead and pull up that question, Tyrone. I just wanted to address something here for Ahmed. He says, I have a voucher for a 50% discount that will expire by the end of the year, and I want to go cloud market. Ahmed, for what I've seen, there's always going to be vouchers. There's always going to be free this, that.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, the purpose is for you to be able to graduate and be able to get a job that you like and that you get paid and compensated well for. Yeah. Now, if this is going to take you 26 days, fine. If it's going to take you more time, that's fine. Again, it comes down to your end goal, what you're trying to accomplish, not the voucher. Trust me, the voucher is always going to be there. It's even if it expires, you'll get something else. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Just wanted to emphasize that for you.
And here's the thing, Ahmed. You don't even need if you really have expertise and you're a BGP expert, there's plenty of cloud network architect jobs you could take right now. if you knew how to design these systems and were familiar with large-scale BGP peering systems and were useful with BGP policy settings, because there's BGP in 1,000,001 places. And if you were really good with networking, you wouldn't need any certifications. I've got plenty of CCAs, and for me, the CCA is the intro to networking, but plenty of CCIAs that also learned networking after that, and that's how they became an expert, that have gone straight from that into cloud network architecture roles, assuming they had the business skills, the sales skills, the executive skills, the presentation skills, and they never got AWS certified or Azure certified or Google certified, because you get hired based upon your skills. But I don't know why people seem to think they're going to learn cloud skills in these AWS certifications, and unfortunately they'll learn names. But they don't really get the skills that are marketable in today's world, because they get the name and how to click on a box in the management console, which would be an admin role. Unfortunately, admin roles died off for the majority of it when DevOps came around, because one DevOps engineer with a Terraform script could replace 100 of these roles. Now what's happening is AI can help the cloud engineers and the DevOps engineers write the AI scripts more and do even more of that work. So because of that, all that entry-level stuff is no longer there. So you can get any job you want, Ahmed, 100% of all of them. We just got to figure out which one you want and then match the skills to it.
Yeah. And the cloud will be there. There's no rush for it. I'll be honest. I always tell people timing is everything. And if you're rushing into something, you should always ask yourself, why am I rushing into it? We're not talking about the gold rush here where it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
We're losing your audio.
Oh, you're losing. Can you hear me now again?
Now I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. So I was going to say, it's not the gold rush here. You have time. Cloud is not going anywhere. It's established itself to be here. It's too large of a market to go away. And half the times people don't even understand it's just another data center with virtualization on top of it. So don't rush. Get the education that you need. If it's with us, do it with us. If you want to do it through somebody else, do it through somebody else. But go back to these key things that we mentioned before. You want to be able to actually ingest and digest the information, apply your skill set, right? So you can build competency. And then it's these soft skills, these non-technical skills that are really going to help you get over the hump. You can have 50,000 certifications. If you don't even know how to communicate the fundamentals of anything you've learned, you know what? They might as well just be toilet paper, I'm sorry to say at that point. They'll have very little value to you. So anyway, keep up the great questions, everybody. Love them so far. Gives us a lot of good suggestions that we can give and have a discussion with you all. With that said, let's go to our next question, please, Tyrone. And this is from Kay. It says, I am very eager to enter the cancer-related industry. As a cloud architect, how can I break into this field? I hope to focus on this area rather than other fields like finance or military. And should I try to enter a pharmaceutical company like AstraZeneca? I can't pronounce half of these. AstraZeneca. There you go. Tongue twister. And
okay. Okay, so Kay, I'm going to be real honest, and I'm going to show you the 360-degree perspective across this. So, you would like to enter the cancer-related industry. I think that is incredibly noble. What I would like to ask you is, have you been an oncologist before? Have you been an administrator of a hospital, like someone that was run, say, Memorial Sloan Kettering, that would give you insight into the business behind cancer treatment, meaning knowing what kind of technology is behind these systems, knowing the types of processes that these organizations actually use, knowing the types of networks that they actually do. And why am I saying this? Because the job of the cloud architect is to design a system to optimize our client's business performance, which means, generally speaking, you need to have some insight or knowledge. So, for example, I've trained architects that went into pharma. They, generally speaking, for me to get a pharma architect, not just a generic architect, they were either a pharmacist, they were a pharmacy executive, and then we added the technology. So I would like to know, what could you do to offer the cancer community? What level of business acumen do you have there? And maybe you've got that knowledge. And if not, go get it. Learn how hospitals actually operate, assuming you want to be on the hospital side of it. Learn where their pain points are. Learn where their revenue points are. Learn what type of systems these organizations use. Learn the way the systems interact with other systems. Because by doing that, that's your prerequisite knowledge. I don't need you to code. I don't need you to know Linux. I don't need you to know Python, but I need to know how to help that industry. So if you don't want a generic industry, and you want to go into a specific industry like healthcare, let's talk about how you do that. So here's what I did when I didn't know how to combine my experience. I left practicing internal medicine, and then I went to the world's largest internet service provider at the time. Now they're called Verizon. In those days, they were called WorldCom. And I worked in networking. And then I said, where's the money at? And everybody told me banking because they had the highest availability requirement. I said, okay. I'm like, well, good news. I did 3/4 of an MBA from Drexel. I've been helping a company managing a real estate company. So I've got some business acumen here, and I have most of an MBA. And then I got a job at a bank. And then I learned more and more about the banking industry. I designed more and more systems for banks. And then at some point, Cisco said, Mike, we want to work we want architecture for the healthcare industry. So what did Cisco do? They hired physicians, they hired nurses, they hired hospital CEOs, they hired physician attorneys, they hired pharmaceutical executives, and they hired life science executives. And they all built them, and they put them on a team in Internet Business Solutions Group, and we were all the healthcare architects. I was designing the technology system, but why could I do that? Well, at one point in my youth, I was a paramedic firefighter, so I knew the emergency side of the business. Then I was an ER nurse. Then I was a nurse practitioner practicing medicine. I got to actually see all sides of the healthcare, so that was my knowledge. So if you want to be an architect in a certain kind of business, in addition to the architecture, learn about that business, because otherwise you won't be able to help that business. And this is how you become an expert. And when you become a domain expert like this, and if it's cancer you want, start learning what places like Memorial Sloan Kettering do differently. What does MD Anderson in Texas do differently? What are some of these elite facilities doing? What are they using? What kind of specialty equipment do they have? What kind of specialty collaboration opportunities do they have? How do they recruit their patients? Where do they get their doctors? Where do they do their research? What goes into that? Now imagine you're armed with this knowledge and you have cloud architecture knowledge. Now you can walk into these companies, and when you meet with those healthcare executives and you speak to the chief nursing officer and the chief medical informatics officer and the chief medical officer and the chief executive officer, you know their problems and you know how to help them. I kind of hope that actually helps here, because I think that would be fairly helpful for you to think about it. So if you want to go into a specific field, go do it. Now, generally speaking, when I'm dealing with somebody for their first architect job, I typically say, try to get what you can for your first job. Go to an AWS, go to an Azure, go to a Google, go to a Cisco, go to an IBM, an Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, Price, Waterhouse-Coopers. Go to somebody really awesome like that. And why? Because that's going to be a gold stamp on your resume. And generally speaking, that's where we typically get our people their first job. But if you're really interested in this and you have a background in this, try and apply for it, but definitely learn something special about that business.
Yeah. And Kay, I'm going to give you 2 little tidbits. Number one, if you're really looking to break into a field, our training is top notch. You should take it, period, when it comes to educating yourself on what it means to actually become a cloud architect. Number 2, to piggyback on what Mike was mentioning, something else that you can do is you can go to a top institution like the NCRA and take a look at what their past efforts have been, what their current efforts have been, so that you can start understanding what their current focus is and see how you can take that mindset of being an architect and apply to some of these efforts that they're working with right now. Now, one of the things is going to be also that you have to keep in mind, that particular field of oncology or cancer in general has shortages of people in general. So if you wanted to be able to become an architect, you'll have to look at these higher institutions because of the budget that they'll have for somebody like you. So don't be afraid to look at the NCRA. Take a look at the CDC as well if you're in the United States, because they're going to give you a wealth of knowledge that you can educate yourself on and then position yourself in a way that's going to be very appealing to them. Hospitals, of course, depending on what the budget and what your occasion are going to be another fantastic opportunity for you to get your foot into the door. But it's all going to be based on, do you understand the surrounding aspects of the business, just like Mike said? Because without it, especially in a field like oncology, anything cancer related, you have to know it. It is so specific, so niche, that if you don't understand not just how to work with the doctors, but also in the people that gather the information. Those are the oncology specialists. You're not going to have an opportunity to actually get in there, because you're going to have to work with them and make their life easier as well to make it more efficient. So take a look at the NCRA. You can kind of Google it. It's the National Cancer Registry Association, and kind of see what efforts they have been doing with that as well. And they're also going to give you pointers in regards to who they work with, so that you can learn a little bit more about the field and see which ways it might give you an opportunity based on what you already know and you feel comfortable with to kind of make some headwinds there. So great question, though. Very specific. Quite interesting. Yeah. So let us take a look at our next question here, please, Tyrone. And this is from, I'm sorry, I don't speak that language, unfortunately. I'll go with 101. It says, hi, Mike, Chris here. First of all, thank you very much for your insightful YouTube channel. I am a cloud solution architect and recently applied for an information technology architect role. Could you briefly explain the difference between an information technology architect and an enterprise solution architect? And what specific aspects should I focus on when preparing for the interview compared to the latter? Thank you very much in advance.
I don't know that that I understood the last part. So let me share something, and I'm going to walk you through the difference, generally speaking, of what your typical architects are. So if you start at the bottom, and what I mean bottom is I'm referring to strategy. I'm not referring to anything else. I'm also referring to pay. So, but it's not a judgment in any way, shape, or form on any of these other roles. And I've held all these roles and I've enjoyed them. So let me share a slide that I made to actually help here. Share screen. Oops, hold on. Share screen. Where's it popping up? For some reason, it doesn't seem to be. Let me make sure that it's not popping up somewhere. Oh, Tyrone, hold on. Remove source. Maybe I need to do that. Okay, share screen. Okay, let me share this. And I think this is going to help you understand the difference. Because when you said enterprise solutions architect, that's exact. Enterprise architecture and solutions architecture are the exact opposite from each other. So Tyrone, share the screen. So if we look at and you can get rid of the question. Actually, you can keep it there. So if we look at the architect continuum, as we go to the bottom, we typically have the solutions architect role. And I love the solutions architect role. My first architect role was a principal solutions architect role, and I enjoyed it. But at this level, we're typically looking at that single vendor. We're doing that design, present, and sell for that single vendor. We're typically doing pre-sales work. We might lead a proof of concept. We're focusing on the actual architecture of itself, of a single vendor stuff in our single vendor cloud environment. So it's a little bit more technical than some of the others. It's about 50 technical, 50% business, but it's kind of focused there. As we move up a level to like that platform architect, it could be an IT architect, it could be a network architect, it could be a cloud architect. Now we're getting into something that's a little bigger. So assuming all of our systems are on a multi-cloud environment, like 89% of customers are, and let's pretend it's just multi-cloud instead of hybrid multi-cloud, which is normal. So that cloud architect in these environments would be managing all the systems on all three clouds. They will be leading the design of any kind of big cloud project, which would be an AI project, a storage project, a compute project, a network project. They'd kind of be the lead architect, and they'd build an architecture team of people that are going to work for them. And this is effectively be the same in your IT architect role. In this place, we're kind of in that platform architect, cloud architect world. We're kind of working on cloud governance framework or IT governance frameworks. We're really working here on really high availability systems, the kind that you couldn't do in a single cloud. We're really focusing on here on getting the best technologies we can from each other's vendors to maximize our technology potential and business potential. We're here involved in, we're now thinking about adoption. We're doing a lot more vendor management. We're now not only starting to worry about worrying how much our stuff costs, but we're more worried about getting some value out of what we actually do. And that's kind of at that IT architect level or that cloud architect level. You can kind of almost call it, I don't want to call it platform architect, but that's kind of that in-between state. And as you move up into an enterprise architect, it's the exact opposite of a solutions architect. Now it's mostly a business role. So when I work as an enterprise architect, I put my Armani suits on, I put a good watch on, I make sure my suits are polished. Because now I'm dealing with the client's executives mostly, and I'm spending most of my day either creating technology roadmaps to align them with business objectives, managing stakeholders, managing vendors. When I have time, I'm going to be looking for areas of improvement in the IT's business processes and the technology to support those business processes. I'm going to be looking at IT-related risks. I'm going to be doing impact analysis of various technology platforms and what they can actually do for the business. Now I'm not just worried about designing things that are cost-effective. I'm worried about investing in that organization's future and really working on getting a positive ROI, return on investment, out of the money that we're spending on tech. Now it's more about agility for the business, and I could be dealing with large-scale governance frameworks, large-scale change frameworks, and I'm constantly working on future state architectures and things like that. So as you move up into these roles, they become much more strategic. As you move down, they become more technical. As you move up, they become more strategic. As you move up, you earn a lot more money, and it's actually your business skills, your EQ that gets you higher. As you move down, it's more of your specialty on a single environment. So that's kind of there. So how do you impress them on an interview for each one of these roles? Well, they're similar, but they're different. So for example, if I was a solutions architect, I could talk about designing a secure demilitarized zone. Here's what we do. We have a network load balancer. We front end 2 next generation firewalls. For example, behind that, we've got another network load balancer that front ends 2 other next generation firewalls. Behind that, etc. I could just give you step by step by step. It's just pure tech on that single cloud. Now all of a sudden, I'm a cloud architect, and now I'm going to talk to you about my strategy across my cloud providers. Now I'm an IT architect, and I'm not just talking about this one thing. Okay, let's talk about how we achieve high availability between our Nutanix data center and the AWS and the Azure clouds. Now you're moving up into that IT architect, that cloud architect realm. And more business, but still, moderately technical. And what do I have to show there? I have to show that I have the knowledge and the expertise to take an organization's complex business challenges, understand what those business challenges are, be able to work with our leadership team. This is the role you're looking to be able to apply for. Being able to create a team, motivate a team, and drive that team to create architectural scenarios that are going to benefit the business. That's at that mid-tier, that cloud architect tier, IT architect tier. Now you move up into the executive architect role, the enterprise architect role, the chief technology officer, the chief information officer. Now I can help the organization align its people, processes, and technology. We can look at your business architecture. We can identify areas of improvement in your business architecture, and then we can help work with you to optimize your business architecture and the technology so that supports your optimal workflows. By doing so, we can increase your revenue by X, Y, Z %. We can improve your operational efficiency by X, Y, Z %. We can reduce your operating expenses by X, Y, Z %, which should have X, Y, Z % increase on your EBITDA, which should also have this percentage of increase on your net income. So as you can see, I went from being something that was somewhat business, somewhat technical, to midway business and midway technical, to a C-suite executive, which is really what the enterprise architect is, with the flip of a switch, because I've held all 3 roles. But that's the key, depending upon the role you interview for. For example, I've trained plenty of architects, and they've gone in there for a solutions architect role, and then they've moved them up into a senior solutions architect role because they showed more business and they showed more strategy. And the more strategy you can show, the better pay you typically get. But in this case, you got to assume that they want 30% technical, 70% business.
Yep. And then to answer a little bit more your latter part, Chris, there. So what you can expect from an enterprise architect type of interview is for them to probe you to see if you understand that the priority in your role is to be a bridge between the tech and the business, but more importantly, make sure that these technical solutions align with the overall business goal and needs. So that's where you're going to get a lot of these type of questions in enterprise role. On the information tech, on the other one, I'm sorry, the actual IT architect type of role, the information technical role, there you're going to get questions more in regards to some of the implementation, but not the implementation in the sense that can you configure something? It's going to be more, do you understand when you're designing the systems? That's going to be your scope. When you're designing the system, is it technically sound so that when the implementation is done, that it's going to be done correctly? So on that type of interview, expect a lot more in regards to, do you understand how the technical solutions fit together so that there's no gaps in there so that it can be passed off? So one is basically mostly business, very little technology there. And then one is more technology and a lot less business in there, because the focus has to be more on the day-to-day type of operations, and as well in regards to how these operations are going to be managed. Both actually great roles, but of course, like Mike said, one is going to pay you exorbitantly a lot more than the other one, because you're so much more closer to the source of the money. So wonderful question. Let's take a look at, I believe there was a follow-up question there from Kay as well. Teron, if we can put it up. So he says, my background is in computer science and I don't have relevant domain knowledge. So is the first step to joining a company like IBM to get exposure to this type of business?
Well, the first step is going to be something to train you to be the architect, because you're not going to get that in a computer science degree. What you're getting is a great education, you're getting a great degree, and that's going to help you. But when it comes to technology careers, when you get done school, you're going to have to learn the one you want. I wish it wasn't the case. It's the reason I tell people don't get computer science degrees, get business degrees, and actually learn the skill that you want. But here's the case. You're halfway there, you're in a computer science degree, whatever you are, finish it. It's a great thing. So the next thing is you're going to need to be trained for the career you want, because nobody can hire you unless you're ready to help them. And that's why I asked you, did you have a background in these things that you wanted to do? Because ultimately, when it's your first job, and then I'm going to get into the rest half of the question that you answered, you're looking for someone that likes you, that sees something in you. They see your intelligence, they see your ability to grow, they see your attitude, your energy, your enthusiasm, your passion. They're looking for someone that's willing to go above and beyond. So which percentage of employers will hire someone without experience for a big job? I'd say 1 out of every 3 managers that you speak to, in my experience. And that's why, I've got lots of people, big jobs as an architect at every place you can possibly imagine. But I'd say 1 in 3 hiring managers is smart enough to basically say, I don't care what's on that person's resume, I'm going to go with my gut. For example, the first person I hired, his name was Shinar. I hired him. He knew absolutely nothing, but he was so good on everything else in his other world that I thought we needed to hire him. He was a rock star. But that was a very rare thing, and I remember going to my manager and telling him why we had to hire someone with no background or ability or knowledge in the field, but with a great attitude. But that was also 20 years ago. So now you have to be prepared for the job. So let's assume you're prepared, you know how to be a cloud architect, you know how to deliver the presentations, lead the teams, create the strategy, respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, give an executive briefing, write a white paper, create an architecture document, that you all have all these skills. Now, you really want to get hired by a company that's the first company that's going to hire you. And in a perfect world, it's an IBM, it's a Microsoft, it's a Cisco, it's a Google, it's an NVIDIA, it's somebody with a big name. Why? Because that's like a gold stamp on your resume if you stay there for a few years. Now, this doesn't mean I want you to put X anything on your resume. No, it means that it looks good on your resume the same way Harvard used to look good on people's resumes many years ago. It used to be a really good thing, and employers used to look for it. Now there's some employers that are boycotting it for various reasons, but it used to look so good. So the point is, a stamp from IBM or Cisco looks really good. So if you're able to get that first, wow, now you've got your first job. Now you've got some pedigree. And now with that degree of pedigree, you are much more desirable to the world. And with that pedigree, because they know that if you're at IBM and you're there as a cloud architect for 2 years, they'll spend $30,000 to $50,000 or more trying to boost up your capabilities in business, leadership, sales. So you're now worth a lot. So now, and maybe it's not, and obviously some of that's going to be based on how good you are at asking and how good you are at showing your strategic value to the organization, but they will pay to get you a lot of training if you're good at it. So now you've got skills as an architect, now you got a pretty resume. Now I'm coming from Cisco and now I go to AstraZeneca or I go to Merck or I go to Pfizer. If I wanted to go in the pharmaceutical industry, I've got something good and I look good. And if you really wanted to be good at it, and you were looking for something while you had your 2 years at, say, an IBM or a Cisco or a Microsoft, you start an MBA. And in that MBA, you get some real business acumen. And now you've got a fancy stamp on your resume. You've got an MBA. You're developing your business acumen. And now you're even marketable, to go anywhere. And in most cases, when you've got a big pedigree and a fancy degree, many companies want to speak to you at least. And at that point, it's either whether you're good or whether you're not good that determines whether you got hired. If you're good, you'll get hired. But so there's those two things. But that's going to make you there. If not, what else could you do? If you wanted to go into pharma, maybe swap out the computer science degree, maybe get a pharmacy degree, if that's what you wanted to do, and then go learn how to be a cloud architect somewhere else. You'll be better, you'll be a great cloud architect, and you'll still know the pharma industry. But my point is, when you're trying to get a unique and specialty role, you have to offer something that's unique and special. You have to show what it is about you that can change that industry. So that's really where I'm trying to get you to think. So think about what could make you better at it. Going out there, being properly trained, great. Developing better presentation skills, yeah. Interview skills, okay? Because when you don't have a perfect resume, the better your interview is, the more the hiring manager is willing to like you. And if you've got specific goals, dreams, and desires, you're going to have to be better because it's going to be harder to get those interviews in your desired field. So what I would typically do is get properly trained, become great. Find yourself a good job that you like. Do that for a couple of years. Don't do a 6-month job, 9-month job. If employers see somebody jump a ship like that, a good ship inside of 9 months, they either figure they got laid off or they got fired or they quit before they got fired. So that does not look good on somebody's resume by any stretch of the imagination. Stay there 2 years. And maybe, just maybe you love it there. And maybe you get promoted every year or two when you move up into leadership and you can do great at one company. Or maybe it's just the place where you started and it's not, and you go somewhere else. You know, I joined Cisco. I didn't know how long I was going to stay there. I joined there and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be here a year. 5 years passed and I'm like, I'm never leaving here. In fact, the only reason I ever left Cisco was I was injured in a massive martial arts accident and couldn't walk for 7 years. Otherwise, I never would have left Cisco. I didn't plan on it. I loved it there. I mean, it was the best place I ever worked. So that could ultimately happen too. So make yourself shiny. Show what you can do. Be an expert on the thing that you want to improve. Because how do you fly a plane if you don't know how to fly the plane? How do you design a spaceship if you don't know about aeronautics? And what my wife used to say, she said, you know, Mike, relationships are just based on need. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And she said, you take any two people. You got one person that's strong that provides comfort to the weaker person. The weaker person makes the stronger person feel comfortable. I'm like, okay, that could see in this situation. In one person, you've got somebody that's good at this. And in the next case, you got somebody that's good at this, and they counterbalance each other. I'm like, interesting. So my wife's got an IQ of 160. She learned Spanish in 2 weeks because she couldn't understand our thoughts. And, you know, one of the things she advised me many years ago, and I've used this with my clients, she says, figure out what you can offer the other party. Make it shiny. Make it clear. Make yourself look like that polished diamond that makes it very clear what's so special about you. And diamonds are very valuable, and I want you to be very valuable. Hope that helps, Kay.
Yep. Very good question. All right. Just to remind everybody, if you've not signed up for tomorrow's webinar yet, it's going to be at 7 p.m. Take advantage of that. We're going to go into a lot more details in regards to how to get that first cloud architect job. And we're going to expand, of course, a little bit more on all the different various roles. You saw Mike already give you a little bit of sneak peek so that you have an idea. And of course, take advantage of the sale that we currently have going on as well. So with that, Let us take a look at our next question here, please. And this is from Data Wrangler. They're asking, how do you draw the boundary for technical knowledge between what a general cloud architect would know versus when a network or a security architect would need to be involved?
Well, let's think about the whole big picture, and I'm going to try to help you here. So if we look at what a cloud architect is really doing, in 98% of enterprises, it's going to be multi-cloud, and in 89% of businesses, it's going to be multi-cloud. So let the implications of that sink in for 1 second. Enterprises generally are multi-cloud. They have 500 to 1,000 enterprise applications. They typically have around 100,000 employees. They typically have, 5,000 remote locations. They typically have 15 to 20,000 routes in the routing table. And they typically have internet access points and potentially 100 locations. Now, if you think any generic cloud architect is going to know how to work with 1,000 different applications and have the knowledge of how to design a backbone for an organization with 5,000 remote locations, you'd be wrong. So unless it was me working as the cloud architect, and I could do that, but you know what happened, Data Wrangler? The second I did that, I'd lose focus of the big picture, which meant the security, it meant the compute, it meant the storage. So even someone with me with that knowledge on the network side, I could work as a network architect, but if I move as a cloud architect, I can't be that deep. So what kind of things make sense? Can I have a cloud architect that doesn't know BGP? Probably not. Can I have a cloud architect that doesn't know, a good cloud architect, someone that can deal with high availability, that doesn't understand IP addressing, subnetting, and supernetting? They're not going to be too good if I need to design high availability systems. If they don't understand routing, I'm probably not going to be too good. Now, Data Wrangler, if they've got excellent leadership skills, I'm okay with it. And that's the things we're going to talk about next. If they don't understand high availability design and what that really means from an infrastructure side, they're never going to understand how to design high available cloud side. And understanding network security, yeah, I need that in a cloud architect. I really do. But that's not that much. I mean, it sounds like that much. And maybe if I spent 60 days teaching from 9 to 5, somebody could learn that much. But then I'd have to go to the next thing. Now, what would you need to know to be a network architect? Instead of where I said 8 hours a day for 2 months, to be a network architect, realistically speaking, I would need to take you. Now, network architecture is much more complicated than cloud architecture, and network architecture is extremely broad. So, CCI on average is 75,000 pages. I'm not joking. And that's the entry level networking. Once you finish the CCI, that's when you get put on the projects and you got to learn what you really don't know. Now, Cisco also has I think they only have 3 different CCIs right now. So all 3 CCIs is about 200,000 pages of reading material. And that's just networking. That's just networking. Now, if you just had to read 200,000 pages of networking and that was the start of your networking knowledge and then you had to learn for the next 10 years, that's what a network architect would learn. So as a cloud architect, you can't get too deep on anything. Now, you'll also have to look at it, Data Wrangler. I want to make it so clear that you can't know anything, that you're going to typically have 2 kinds of people in cloud architecture. And both backgrounds are going to give their strengths and their weaknesses. The best people to design a high availability, high security system are the people that come from an infrastructure perspective. Because all high availability stuff, typically speaking, comes down, most of it is related to the plumbing, the power, the networking, and all the cabling and the redundancy. So the people that are best suited for cloud architecture for designing high availability, high performance, high scalability systems are infrastructure people. But what do infrastructure people not know, Data Wrangler? For the most part, we infrastructure people know very little about application architecture, typically speaking, very little about data, and typically less about databases. Is that a gap? Sure is. So we do our best to fill in those gaps, but we're never going to get them like an application person. Other people, Data Wrangler, are like David Lithicum. David Lithicum brings a world of experience in the world of application architecture and data and big data and AI architecture. He brings a lot less of that infrastructure and security. So here's the thing, Data Wrangler. I'm going to find a David Lithicum from that application background in every cloud architecture I do. I'm going to look for the person that's the best suited, most smart, capable, fundable person I know that knows exactly what I don't know. And that's how I build my architecture teams. I'm going to learn from architecture and infrastructure people. I'm going to hear what application people say. And that's why it was last Friday, one of my students that works from AWS, that's an application architect, came in and talked to my students about application architect. I think it was last Friday. Maybe it was a previous Friday. But that's why I bring both sides of the things when it comes to people, to teach what I know and to teach what I don't know. Or what I'm not that I don't know, things that are not my specialty. So if you're dealing with an enterprise, you're never going to be designing an architecture by yourself. So if you're dealing with an enterprise, you're going to be dealing with a 15 to 50 person architecture team. Now, Data Wrangler, when wouldn't you need a network architect? Well, generally speaking, cloud architects don't work in any environment where it's not going to be an enterprise, so you probably wouldn't have to worry about it. But if you are in the business of putting businesses with 10 people, 10 employees or less on the cloud, you don't need network architects. If you were putting a system that had 500 people on the cloud, you probably don't need network architects. But what company that only has 500 employees is going to pay $250,000 a year for a cloud architect either? They're not going to because they don't need it. So for the most part, we cloud architects start working in big worlds, big environments, big business. And big business gets really complicated. So generally speaking, you're probably going to want to build an architecture team. So I can tell you that for the most part of my career, Data Wrangler, it was really this. It was, Mike, here's this project. I need you to work with this bank and create the contact center of the future. I'm like, okay, I'm not an IP voice person. Okay, but Mike, it needs to do this. I'm like, all right. Okay, I need a QoS expert. I need a voice expert. I need a voice security expert. I need 2 people that know how to put this stuff together because we're all architects and we won't have any idea. Now I need this person. Wait, we got wireless phones too. Okay, I need some wireless people. Poof, that's my architecture team. Design it, document it, present it, sell it. There's a proof of concept time. I do the leadership thing. All the experts come and build it out. While they're building it out, I'm talking to the clients. I'm making the clients comfortable. When anything's not going right, when these my team's trying to build it out, I'm back. I'm escalating things. I'm getting them resources so they can do their job and make us all look good. That way, I'm facilitating a smooth proof of concept. I hope that answers your question there, Data Wrangler. So the key is, generally speaking, and actually how else would I answer it? If you can't do it yourself and you can't research it and do it yourself, you need to get an expert. Because think about it this way. Imagine if you did something that you didn't know and all of a sudden the business went down. It's a hospital. You don't know networking well enough. And you think you're going to just have somebody set up a BGP peering thing that's going to do a certain thing. All of a sudden you set up BGP, the whole hospital goes down. And nobody can figure out why, because nobody noticed that somebody changed BGP. While the hospital is down, the power goes off, then people are in surgery. Patients in the hospital, you no longer have access to the records, and people die. So if I was in that situation, very simple. I don't know how to do this. I need help. Bring me an expert, and that's what I would do. Mark, you want to add to this? Because you've taken both sides.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would definitely not be afraid of asking for help. I know myself, I've actually been on meetings where I was not the subject matter expert. But because I anticipated that this perhaps could come up, I went out of my way of finding somebody that could serve as my subject matter expert. So I think that overall, we have a little bit of a misunderstanding when it comes to the industry, especially when it comes to architecture. Many people believe that you're supposed to be the only person that has the answers to all the questions. And that definitely is completely wrong. I actually want to be in a position where I don't always feel like I am the smartest person in the room. And the reason for that is that if I'm the smartest person in the room for everything, then I'm missing the bigger picture. And as the architect, you generally want to be able to keep in mind the bigger picture of what it is that you generally are going to be more experienced with, that you're going to have more understanding with. So if, let's say, if I was in a role where I was the network architect and a customer came and said, okay, we're looking to do a migration from cloud provider A to cloud provider B. Could I potentially do that if I was a network architect? I can probably make my way through it somehow. But the question is, would that be the best way to go about it? And would that be the best thing for my customer? And there the answer would be no. And I have to be realistic with that. The possibility of me knowing the details of what is necessary of doing that migration is going to be slim to none compared to somebody who is spending his every day in and out, working on something that's specific. So you need to be able to be humble enough and understand what your limitations are there when it comes to the technical aspect of things, and then get the people involved that can handle it in an appropriate manner. Because aside being a team sport, architecture is always, and I say always, about the customer and their business. It has nothing to do with you. You're there to be the bridge between the gap of tech and the business. That's what you're there for. And to give proper advice based on sound thinking of what a solution eventually when it gets put together. And you can only do that when you have people around you that you have picked, that you can trust, that you know also have the same mindset as you do, meaning business first, customer first. And if you don't do that, I think you're going to find yourself in situations where you're going to lose out on your credibility, your rapport, and more importantly, you're going to potentially be burning and ruining part of your customer's business. And that's what we have seen many times happen with a lot of the failed cloud projects and architecture that has been going on for many years now. And that's why we had this huge drive to repatriate, basically bring back a lot of the architecture from cloud back onto our on-premises data center. So you want to definitely keep that in mind. Swallow your ego if you have one, and focus on what's important. That's the customer. Yeah. Bring together the team that's going to do the best for the customer. So I hope that answers your question, Data Wrangler. Let's go on to our next question here, please. And this is from Tori Tetsu. Oh, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. I'm going to go with the last one because I might actually be able to pronounce that. So Okpotse. It says, how much of an overlap is there between the Go Cloud Enterprise Architect and Generative AI Architect programs? Are there aspects of the Gen AI program included in the Enterprise Architect program?
So let's talk about it. There is some overlap between these programs, but let me tell you how it would work versus the best thing if somebody wanted to learn AI and enterprise architecture at the same time, which I take it is what your desire is. So there are certain things that are overlap. For example, all architects need a level of presentation skills, sales skills, executive presence, emotional intelligence, CXO relevancy, and the such. And all of that is the same in both programs. The Enterprise Architect program has a lot more cloud and a lot more networking and a lot more security than the AI Architect program, which is focused predominantly on AI architectures. The Enterprise Architect needs much more business acumen, executive presence, leadership, business process re-engineering, and digital transformation. So the Enterprise Architect has that. So the AI Architect program is geared towards turning someone into an AI architect, which is basically the AI equivalent of a cloud architect. And the Enterprise Architect is more geared towards building people towards the executive architect, those roles that are more business oriented and more functional. Because if you're focusing on AI in your job, you're not going to be able to focus on the enterprise to the level of the Enterprise Architect. So that's the real challenge. If you're focusing on the network, great. You can focus a little on the business, but by very definition, you're focusing on the network. If you're focused on the enterprise, now you're managing the business processes. Now you're looking at the business architecture. You're about people, processes, and technologies. Now it's about architectural review boards and WAGR facilitation of more meetings. and enterprise architecture frameworks, much more vendor management, and so much more. So those are the skills. You want to hear the secret? You want the most efficient way to get the best architecture education? Become an enterprise architect. And I'll tell you why. The enterprise architect, realistically speaking, has the best knowledge and the highest career potential. And typically speaking, the highest earnings, and it's typically the easiest of the jobs. Now, then, if you are our student, if you bought the Enterprise Architect program, which is off at 50% off right now, then we have a policy for our students. As soon as you buy the course, it's open it, and it says add the AI modules from the AI Architect program for a very small price. And it would pretty much be much cheaper to do it that way. And that way you get all the extra business executive things that you're getting in the Enterprise Architect program. You're getting the full Cloud Architect program, and you're still getting a good amount or a reasonable amount of AI in that class because we still do some AI courses. And then if you wanted more AI, meaning the ability to not only get the AI content, but to attend David Lithicum's 2 live classes per week, it would be a very small upgrade fee compared to the cost of the course. Hope that helps.
And let's
I
not
have a lot of
forget
students
the
doing
discount
that.
currently as well.
Oh, yeah. And tomorrow we've got a How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar, and I can answer more questions about it. And we can meet face-to-face and talk live if you'd like. And I'd love to meet you.
Yeah, and just to add to it a little bit too is you also have the additional discount that we have going on right now. So you can actually stack the savings on it if you want to take advantage of doing it the way that Mike said. So there's definitely different avenues to go about it now before it starts running out. And again, I don't. They stopped telling me when these sales stop. Just like last month when we had slots open, and I kept trying to ask them, "What is slots? How many slots?" And they go, "Like, we can't tell you, Mark. You're just going to give it away." Okay, so I'm like, fine.
They wouldn't tell me either. The whole marketing team is like, Mike, Mark, you do your thing. You're teaching. You're educating. You go focus on what you're doing. Mike, all things are good behind the scenes. But yeah, it'd probably be cheaper for you to buy the Enterprise Architect program on sale right now and the AI module than it normally would be to buy either one of those programs at normal price.
Yep, definitely agree. So take advantage of that. If not, talk to us a little bit more tomorrow about it. It could be that you need a little bit more information in regards to the actual role, and that's fair. We completely understand that. So if that's the case, we'll definitely see you tomorrow, and we'll discuss a bit more details during the webinar. It's going to be coming up at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Tyrone, let us take another question here, please. And this question comes from Brandon, and they're wondering, while completing the Cloud Architecture program, is it best to complete the Cloud Fundamentals before starting the career development portion? Brandon?
Yeah.
Go ahead, please, Mike.
Respond first, Mark.
Okay. So I was going to tell you, the best thing that I would always suggest, and I say this to all the students, is follow the structure laid out in the program. The reason for that is they're all stepping stones for one another. So like in your case, it definitely would be better you start with your orientation, you move into the introduction of technology, then you tackle the fundamentals of cloud, then, because that's going to be the next module, right? Then you go into the actual career development portion. And it's a very simple reason why we do it that way. It's going to be very difficult to even start to wrap your head around the various options you have when it comes to what type of architect you're going to be and how to develop a plan around that if you don't have no understanding about the foundational technologies which are going to be presented to you.
Yeah.
So that's why you want to go in order by order. You don't want to jump, one module to the other module, which, by the way, we have safeguards for that, so you couldn't do it anyway. But even if you tried, you don't want to do it that way. This is a tried and tested method. We've had many people that are successful going through that process. I definitely can understand sometimes you come across something maybe that you're already familiar with and you just want to get into the meat and the potatoes of it that are going to be applicable to you. But please trust the process. Take a little bit of time. Do it step by step. And I can almost guarantee you that you will get the results that you're looking for if you do it that way and you put in the work to accomplish it that way.
Yeah, and all this is, I mean, there's a point where we force it to be a thing. You have to do these fundamentals first. And then there's a point where we let you branch out. Now, the key is it all depends on who you are and where you're coming from. And I'll explain. So in the past 24 hours, I've had messages with 3 CCIEs at various parts of the world. 3 Cisco certified internet experts that have had various degrees from 5 years to 25 years worth of experience. And they said, how do you do this? And I described the program, and they're like, I like it, so you cover everything. And they said, do I have to do all the networking things? And I said, well, it depends what it is. I said, open the networking thing. If you open the networking thing and it's on IP addressing and you've been designing IP addressing plans, skip it and go to the next one and go to the next one. We just want to make sure everybody has a good level of foundations on everything. Why am I saying this example? If I've got someone that's been doing big, heavy tech work for the last 25 years and they've been a hardcore engineer and they reach this tech section, maybe they focus more on the leadership as they put 80% of their efforts into the leadership, the presentations, the this, and 20% of their time into filling the tech gaps on the stuff they don't understand. Now, if I'm talking about someone that's brand new, that's never been in tech before, I'd finish those tech fundamentals early on. And why would I do it early on? Because then all those live classes we do are going to make more sense and make more sense. And everything's going to fit together faster. And then I would go through the career development parts of the program. But it's like anything else. It all really depends on your starting point and your goals and your strengths and your weaknesses where you're at. And it all depends. If I have a software developer, I love software developers, but if I've got a software developer, chances are they don't know 90% of what's needed on the cloud. What they know is software development, which is something that I don't know anything about. I mean, I know a little bit about it. I don't know how to code, but I understand the art methodologies and things, but because it's not my world. And if I was going to be in an application architecture course, first thing I would do is I would do those tech fundamentals because it's not my fundamentals. Now, if I've got someone that's basically close to code, but they're not actually dealing with hardware and CPUs and DRAM and sizing these things and understanding networking and packet flows to the network and routing protocols and network infrastructure, they better get straight to those tech fundamentals pretty quickly so they can go through all those architecture fundamentals because it's everything other than what they've done in their life. And then when they get to the application architecture sections, maybe they know it, maybe they don't. If they know it, skip and move on. And that's the beauty. You could be like Noah, who was a social worker, who was hired by a head when he was done. You can be like Vladimir, who was hired by North Highland as an architect when he was done. And you could be like Ian, who was hired in England. I forget where Ian went. He was really great. One of the bigger consulting companies. His name has escaped me. But the point is, anybody can do anything. So I hope that answers your question there, Brendan. And I look forward to seeing you in class.
Well, everybody, I'm actually going to cut us off right here because I want to be able to let you know some of the upcoming things that are coming up for this week. I can't just yet give it away. I promised I wouldn't what's coming up in the next 2 weeks. But please be assured, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, because we have something planned pretty much every day of the week going on for the next 3 weeks, and you don't want to miss it. So just as a reminder, tomorrow at 2 p.m., Mike and Mr. David Linthicum, the author and the main trainer for the Generative AI program, are going to have a discussion in regards to the things that have been mentioned during the AWS reInvent event. I guess one is with the I, the other one is with the E. That's spelled out. So you definitely don't want to miss that. Of course, get your questions ready during that time too. You're going to have 2 experts in the field with you, thought leaders that have a plethora of knowledge at their disposal and experience. So you definitely want to pick their brain on that, especially when it comes to some of the things that perhaps we've done for 10, 15, 20 years. And all of a sudden, we're trying to make it sound like it's new technology, new solutions. So you definitely don't want to miss out for that. And then, of course, on Friday at 2 p.m. as well, Eastern Standard Times, we'll have an entire discussion in regards to the cloud architect interview and also the impact of your interview. And if I'm correct, we might even have a little bit of a potential demo in regards to what that interview might be like. So you definitely don't want to miss out on that. Interview is always fun. By the way, the interview aspects of the classes are one of the most engaged classes that we have, the most attended classes, even with our students. So you definitely don't want to miss out for that. Aside from that, make sure that you sign up for tomorrow's webinar at 7 p.m. Eastern time. There we're going to discuss on how to get your first cloud architect job. And we're also going to be discussing other architects roles so that you get an understanding of it. Especially, I look forward to seeing. And I again apologize for the name. It's just doesn't flow off the tongue for me. It's Octoputus. I hope we see you there as well, so you can ask a few more questions and get your bearings on being able to take advantage of the enterprise and the Gen AI. And then, of course, don't forget, they won't tell me how long it lasts. They just say it's off for Cyber Week. I don't know if this is truly a week. They always throw these things around me and Mike so that to keep us guessing. But definitely take advantage of the 50% sale that we currently have on all the programs, including all the options when it comes to those programs. And then take advantage of what you've seen some already in the chat and have asked questions. Go ahead and stack the different modules for yourself so you can take advantage of it right now and then. Aside from that, Mike, do you have any closing statements for us today? Did you like everybody to know?
Yeah, and please join us for David. David's not only the author of our AI Architect program, but he was Deloitte's chief cloud strategist. So he's got about 35 years experience. I've got about 25. Oh, that means 70 years experience between us if I did the math correctly in my head, which is just a little bit scary. But oh wait, maybe I don't know.
It's okay if you say it.
Yeah, so I think it was 60. Actually, I'm gonna do the round. I think it's 60. You shouldn't do math in your head while you're speaking live, but that's neither thing. So join us for that, and we're gonna go over a lot of things in the coming weeks. We have all kinds of things. We have Russ White coming one day, who's an icon in network architecture. David Lithicum is obviously an icon in cloud architecture, where I've been in about 150 publications like CIO Magazine and Data Center Magazine, DevOps Magazine, Information Week, Tech Republic, Tech Radar. David's been in 17,000. He's written 17,000 articles. I think it's like 16 books. He's been teaching in this field, so he brings a lot of experience with us. So he and I have been covering conferences, going to conferences, hosting conferences for the last few decades, and we will cover the updates related to AWS tomorrow. Tomorrow's Thursday, right?
Tomorrow.
Yep. So David and I will be doing that, and then we'll have our Cloud Architect Job webinar. We'll talk about the role. We'll talk about what we do. It'll be on Zoom. You can ask us questions, want us to check your LinkedIn profile or something to see if it looks like an architect. I don't care. We'll do it. We just want to help you. See you all later. If you haven't given us a like, please do so. I'm trying to learn this YouTube algorithm thing. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified of new videos, because Mark and I have a big secret coming out soon, and it's going to be something you're all going to be excited about. Take care, everyone.